Today we're going to be talking about outlining. We're going to start with the basics and then in our next lesson move on to more advanced outlining. A good speech is like a pencil. It has to have a point, author unknown. Your point in a speech is also known as your thesis. And if you are not clear on it, your audience will never be clear on it. Once you're clear on it, you want to organize your speech around that point so that everything you're doing is supporting your thesis. Why bother to outline? Why not just stand up there and just start talking? Well, first of all, an organized speech is easier to follow. Remember, audience members in today's world are not used to receiving their information orally. We're used to getting things visually, so it's much harder for them to follow along, understand, and retain information that someone is just speaking to them. So therefore, as speakers, it's our responsibility to try to convey information in a way that makes it easier for the audience member to follow along, understand, and retain. And one of the basic ways to do that is to have it very well organized, so there's a logical flow and it's easier for people to follow along. Outlining also helps you as the speaker. As you're preparing to give your speech event, it helps you figure out how much you actually have to say about that particular topic. It helps you to limit your speech to one or two main ideas. This is particularly important if you're talking about something that you're knowledgeable about and passionate about. It's very easy to get up there and keep going on and on and on about something. Keeping in mind your audience and the time limits that you have, an outline helps you figure out exactly how much time you have, how many points you're going to make, and keeps your ideas into that structure. It will also help you identify if your topic is too narrow. When you go to write out your outline, you're like, I really only have one main point. I don't think I'm going to be able to talk for 15 minutes about this. I need to broaden my idea. And keep in mind, there's two different kinds of outlines. There's a planning outline and a speaking outline. The planning outline is for the writing portion. You do this before you give your speech. Your speaking outline is one that you might use as notes during the speech, and that's designed to help you remember the material. So we're going to start out with planning outlines. Planning outlines use the basic standard outline format. I'm sure most of you have done this a million times. It's the same kind of format you would use if you're outlining for a paper. You label the parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. Those are with Roman numerals. If you're giving a longer speech, your body might have actually several Roman numerals. If you're giving a talk for 45 minutes, if you're giving a short 5-minute talk, your Roman numeral 2 is probably going to be body, and your points that you're making are going to be the points below that. You want to indent your supporting idea, so each level of the outline is indented. You want to include your thesis statement. That is the point that you're trying to make with this speech. What is the purpose of your speech? You use complete sentences in this outline. One of the dangers is when people are outlining, they have some idea in their head and they don't want to be bothered with the process of writing it out, and that becomes apparent when they give the speech. And so when they do the outline, they just talk about this here, talk about this here, or just use one word: desk, chair, table. No. For this really to help you, you need to write out a complete sentence. What is it exactly are you trying to say about a desk? What exactly are you trying to say about a table? And you also want to write out your transitions. So how are you getting from one section to the next section? What is it that you're going to say? How are you tying your different points together? Here's an example of what that would look like. You have your introduction, Roman numeral 1. And then this is for a shorter speech, so Roman numeral 2 is the main body, Roman numeral 3 is the conclusion. You see the first level indents is the capital letters, and then as you're making another point, here's your first subpoint that's indented a little more. Supporting material for those are with the smaller letters. Notice the transition between each section. How are you getting from this section to this section, from this section to this section? And then you have your conclusion, which has your review of the main points, so a little summary, and then your final closing statement. What is the powerful statement that you are going to use to close your material? And then finally, your bibliography. So where did you get the sources for this material? Depending on your topic, you may or may not be sharing that with your audience. Most likely, yes. You would have to consider carefully why you would not want to share that information information with your audience. If you're doing a PowerPoint, often you just put that up on the last slide. Definitely if you're doing something for a class or something that you'd be submitting, whether it's to a teacher or whether to a boss, you always want to include that bibliography. Your introduction is going to have these separate points. We're going to get to all of that when we do the advanced outlining lecture. So what is different in a speech outline than a paper outline? Most of it is the same, but there are a couple points that are different. 3 of the main things that you're going to include in a speech outline that you are not going to necessarily have in a paper outline are signposts, transition statements, and internal summaries. So what are signposts? Signposts are things that you say that let the audience know that you are giving out either a new piece of information or an important idea. It also orients your listener, you're the speaker. Oh, look what I did. I apologized. I told you not to do that. See, don't do that. Signpost will let your listener know where you are. All of us, days off for a second here or there. Sometimes we just get confused as we're trying to process all this information. So it's always good to reorient your listener to where you are in the speech. So if you've lost them, you can bring them back. And it also brings the organizational structure to the surface. This isn't a secret how you've organized it. You want to let your audience know, first I'm going to be talking about this, then I'm going to be talking about this, and then I'm going to conclude with this. So they have a really clear idea of where it is that you're going on this speech journey together, and then they can figure out where they are in that process. So here's some examples of signposts. Now this is important. That's a signpost. You don't have to imply it's important. You could actually just come out and say, this is an important point. Another example would be the 3 elements to organizing a speech are signposts, transitional statements, and internal summaries. That's an example of a signpost because I've conveyed to you, the listener, what the structure is that I'm talking about here. You can also use numbers as signposts. So you can say the first point I'm making is this, the second point I'm making is this. Signposts are also used to highlight something that is significant that you don't want your audience to miss. So you could say, please remember that signposting is very important. That would be an example of a signpost. The second thing that you need to include are transition statements. These are the statements that take you from one part of the speech to another. Remember, your audience doesn't know what it is you're going to say. And unlike when they're reading something, if they get lost, you can go back and say, wait a minute, I thought they were going to talk. Oh, I see. Now he said he was going to go. They don't have that. So a transition statement lets them know, oh, now he's moving on to the next point. Oh, now she's getting to the conclusion. It also helps to focus attention. No matter how fascinating a speaker you are, there's going to be some people who are thinking about what they're going to have for lunch or stressed by what they're going to be doing afterwards or how behind they're getting. And so when we transition, if you've lost them a little bit in the middle, that brings them back to focus. Think about when you're in class and you kind of zone out a little bit and then the teacher says, okay, now we're moving on to the next point. It sort of catches your attention. You're like, ooh, okay, now I need to pay attention. It also keeps the speech interesting. When you have these transition statements, it keeps people focused and interested. What are transition statements? You can use bridging words such as in addition to. That bridges one thought to the next. It lets the audience member know, oh, okay, this is connected to that. Point-by-point transitions, when you say first this, then this, then this. You can ask a question. So maybe you're moving from one part of the body to the next part of the body. You might ask a question that involves the next point that you're making. You can use a feedback phrase where you're actually letting people know, oh, this is where we are. So go back to what you said before. Or remember when I said in the first section we were going to talk about X? Now that's what we're talking about. You can also use stories and anecdotes as transition statements, something to get the audience interested in what the next point is. Internal summaries. So of course we're going to have a summary in the conclusion, but you're giving people a lot of information in a way that they're not good at processing. So it helps to, when you finish up a section, to kind of summarize what it was when you were in that section. So you could say, remember we said that. So we've covered this, this, and this. Don't forget that you have to do this first rather than this other thing. If any of you watch cooking shows, they are a great example of that. So you are going to explain to someone you need all of these ingredients, and then you're telling people what to do. And you might say, oh, now as we move on to the next section, remember that you have to have this, 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 and this. You're summarizing what that little chunk of information was that you gave them. So to review the 3 elements that you need to organize your speech, and these are the things that would be different from a traditional outline for a paper, are signposts, transition statements, and internal summaries. Now, that's for a planning outline. Speaking outline is a little bit different. So this would be the outline that when you gave up to give your speech, if you were going to bring up an outline to use for notes, and there's different, some people can do spontaneously with no notes. If you're using PowerPoint, if you've rehearsed enough, you can use your PowerPoint as your notes. Some people use note cards. Some people use an outline. They just bring a big piece of paper, it sits there on the podium next to them, and that's what they use to keep themselves oriented. If you're going to be using a speaking outline, it's different from your planning outline. You can use your planning outline as the basis, but what you're going to be doing is subtracting a lot. So you follow along the main structure of the planning outline, but you want to be really brief. You do not have time to be looking down and reading your outline. It's supposed to just be a reminder, oh, that's right, here's where I am. So you want to make it a tool that really works for you. Usually I would take each of those points, the Roman numeral 1, the letter A, and I would take what was a whole sentence and get it down to 1 to 2 words. Because again, you're going to have rehearsed, you're going to know this material, you just need a little reminder of here's where I am, oh, that's right, this is what I wanted to talk about there. Then my other tip is blow it up into as big a font that will allow it to fit on the paper. So normally you're going to use a 12-point font. You might have that on an 18, 20, 22-point font, depending on how long your outline is, because you want to just be able to glance down really quickly and be able to read it. And that's all, folks. That's it for our basic outlining. We'll cover more in the advanced outlining section.